Thank you very much to Rabbi Stephen for speaking. Very excited to have you with us. Okay, thank you very much. So this is my maiden speech with my new sort of title, my new qualification. Just as some background before we start. Firstly, a lot of you asked, what do I do this Semicha in and why did I do it? So just to say that I was looking for something to do to pass my spare time in my retirement from professional work, and I thought that rather than doing car maintenance or learning Chinese in the evening, I thought I'd do something with a bit more tachlis. So I heard about this course, and I decided to follow this course. It was from a yeshiva in Ramat Bet Shemesh, Israel, yeshiva called Yeshiva Chonin Das, and they run these programs for mature students, so people who have a profession, another vocation, but wants to have some extra learning. So mainly mature people, doctors, lawyers, accountants, and actors, and they have classes in the daytime and the evening there in Ramat Shemesh on different subjects, and they also run courses online. On Zoom and online courses. So I looked at the courses and I chose a course which I thought would be of interest to me. And I followed the course over the last over a year and did tests and what have you, and eventually passed and got my Semicha certificate. The course I did was in two sections of the Shulchan Aruch. As we know, the Shulchan Aruch has 4 sections. And the 2 sections I majored in was the second half of Yored Deah, and 2 sections of Yored Deah, and second section of Yored Deah, sorry, and these Even HaEzer. Yored Deah primarily deals with the laws of kashrut. I didn't do that section, but I did the section on laws of mezuzah, Sefer Torah, honoring parents, tzedakah, conversion, laws of Kohanim, agricultural laws, and then Even HaEzer has laws of marriage, laws of divorce, adultery, chalitza, mamzerut, and things like that. So it's quite an interesting course, and I thought a lot of it's quite practical halacha, and that's why I chose that course. The person giving the course said that they major on courses in halacha rather than conventional yeshivas, which tend to spend a lot of time learning sort of sections of the Gemara and other sort of codes, and they prefer to go straight to the end halacha. Without halacha, practical halacha, you can't really do anything at all. It's all right learning. You have to learn Gemara and learn the derivation of the laws, but practical halacha is something which is more maybe more relevant to modern day life. So what I decided to talk about this week is something which is at the beginning of this week's parsha, last week's parsha. We had double parsha on Shabbat, Bahar and Bechukotai, and the beginning of Bahar gives us the laws of Shemitah, the agricultural laws, that when we come to the land of Israel, we have to count 6 years, and the 7th year is a sabbatical year when the land lies fallow. And it has the laws of that, and then it goes on to the laws of Yovel, the Jubilee year. I'll come on to that later. So we talk about the laws of Shemitah, and then at the end of the double Seder in Bechukotai and the curses, it says that if you don't keep my Shemitahs, then one of the curses will be that the land will be appeased and you will be exiled, and the land will be appeased for you not observing the Shemitah years. And we know that the first exile, the Babylonian exile, was for 70 years, and the rabbis say that there was 70 Shemitah years that the Jewish people in temple times did not observe, and as a punishment for not observing those 70 years of Shemitah, they were exiled for 70 years to Babylon, and for those 70 years, the land in Israel laid fallow. That land wasn't farmed as a punishment for not observing the Shemitah. So the Shemitah is a very, very important law. The Shemitah is also found in 2 other places in the Torah. Firstly, in Shemot 23, it mentions that you should, in the 7th year, you should let the land lay fallow. And then also in Devarim, we learn about one of the other laws of Shemitah about the release of debts. That in Shemitah, all debts are between Jews that are actually released. So that is another law of Shemitah. So there's in fact 4 places in the Torah where Shemitah is really spoken about. So the question is Shemitah today, is it rabbinical or Torah law? Does anyone have an idea on that? Is it rabbinical law or is it a Torah law today? Yeah, quite okay. There's a dispute. Thank you very much. If I need somebody else to give me a proper answer on that. Yeah, it's a dispute, but because basically, in order for it to be Torah law, there were 3 requirements in order for Shemitah to be Torah law. The 3 requirements are the number one, the majority of Jews in the world live in Israel, and we are virtually there now anyway. Also, that all the Shabbatim, all the tribes live in their allotted territories in Israel. So, we know when the land was captured by Joshua, each tribe got its own portion. So all tribes had to be in their own portions. And thirdly, that the Yovel, the Jubilee year, has to be sanctified and observed. Now, the Jubilee year is no longer observed because we don't have a Sanhedrin to actually count the years. So therefore, those 3 requirements are not actually valid today. So therefore, the majority view is that Shemitah now is Mitzvah Rabbanan. It's a rabbinical law, not a Torah law. So how do we work out when a year is a Shemitah year? Well, quite simply, you take the year, the number of the year, and divide by 7. If there's no remainder, it's a Shemitah year. So last year, 5782. If you divide it by 7, you get 826. Therefore, last Jewish year was a Shemitah year. However, even that has a bit of, there are some disagreements about that calculation because Shemitah was not observed until the Jewish people actually entered the Holy Land and actually conquered the land under Joshua. And it was 14 years after their entry into Israel when the first Shemitah was observed. So unless that year was a year which was divisible by 7, I don't know if it was or not, then the calculation of dividing it by 7 may not actually be accurate. The other problem with the calculation of the Jubilee year is that, as I mentioned, the beginning of the Seder today, we talk about the last week's Seder, Bahar, we talk about how they counted 7 cycles of 7. And after the 7 cycles of 7, they had the 50th year, which was the Jubilee year. So 7 cycles of 7, 49, similar to counting of the Omer. And the 50th year was the Jubilee year. Now, there's a dispute amongst the rabbis. That year 50, was that a standalone year on its own? And then they started counting 7 cycles of 7 after that? Or was that 50th year the first year of the new cycle? Again, a bit of dispute. If it were the first year, if it were a standalone year, then dividing by 7 doesn't work. So there is a bit of a problem there. But anyway, today we observe Shemitah, Israel, Shemitah is observed purely as a memory of what happened, and it is rabbinical, although it does have certain requirements. So what does Shemitah, we don't really learn about the laws of Shemitah in this country because it doesn't really apply here, but in Israel it is quite a big issue. It applies to all the biblical land of Israel, the biblical land of Israel. So we have some questions in modern day Israel. What about Eilat? Is Eilat part of Israel or is it not biblical Israel? The requirements of Shemitah also apply to some of the territories just outside Israel. Parts of Syria were considered part of biblical Israel for the purposes of agricultural laws, Marser and also Shemitah as well. So what happens to Syria? What about Gaza? Gaza, is it part of Israel or is it not part of Israel? So that is problems which rabbis have to deal with today. And the other thing about Shemitah is, although we say Shemitah is the 7th year of the cycle, in fact, the restrictions span 3 years because the restrictions start at year number 6. You can't plant fruit trees from Tu B'Av, from the 15th of Av onwards in year number 6 because it will take root and they'll start growing in the Shemitah year. And you can't plant other trees and produce from the 15th of Elul onwards. So basically, the Shemitah restrictions start before the 7th year. That's the first thing. The other thing is that the Shemitah restrictions go on to year number 8, because if you produce is planted in year number 7, it takes root, and the time the fruit actually grows to a state that it can actually be picked and eaten is year number 8. And in fact, you will find our local Beth Din in London will give out lists of fruits and products from Israel and the dates which still have Shemitah restrictions. And I believe even today, we have restrictions on dates, avocados, and I think it's satsuma. Three products from Israel still are covered by Shemitah restrictions, because although they grew in the 7th year, they actually reached a state when they can be eaten and harvested in the 8th year. So the actual prohibitions in the Shemitah, there are 6 prohibitions in the Shemitah year. 4 of them are from the Torah and 2 are rabbinic. So what are the prohibitions? Number 1, the land has to be ownerless. You have to make it hefker. You cannot own land. You cannot. A farmer can't say that produce is his. It's ownerless. You mustn't throw away Shemitah produce. It has a sanctity. You can't do business with Shemitah produce. You have to, after the year end, you have to actually make any Shemitah produce you have to make it hefker. They're the 4 Torah laws. And the 2 rabbinic laws are, firstly, anything which grows on its own. If something grows on its own, and sometimes vegetables grow on their own, sometimes there's seeds in the ground, they grow by themselves. Ordinarily, that wasn't prohibited in Shemitah, but the rabbis instituted a prohibition on those products as well, in case you purposely put those seeds out to grow them. And secondly, there's a prohibition of taking Shemitah produce outside the land of Israel. And that is the reason why Shemitah produce is not allowed in this country, because it's been taken outside the land of Israel. I'll come on to what Heter Mechira produce is in a second, but Heter Mechira produce could theoretically be taken out of Israel because it's exempt from Shemitah, but we don't follow that anyway. So, right. So if you live in Israel and you have fruit or vegetables growing in your garden, or if you're a farmer with produce, you have to make your field, your garden, ownerless. That means you can't have a gate on the door. You have to open the gate or take down the fence, and it's ownerless, which means anyone can come in off the street and pick your fruit and eat it, and they're allowed to do so. Or if you're a farmer and had a field, anyone can go into the field and pick the produce for themselves and eat it. So it has to be ownerless. You can't say it's yours. As I said, Shemitah applies to all edible fruit and vegetables, and even flowers which have a smell. So if you grow, I don't know, roses or something in your garden, those roses, if they have a smell, they are Shemitah produce, and you have to make them odorless. And therefore, if you are buying flowers in Israel in a supermarket, in a flower store, you have to check there's a hechsher on the shop to show that the produce is not Shemitah produce. Any byproducts for Shemitah produce are also holy. For example, wine, oil, and even paint, making sure is holy paint. So we have 3 ways of actually being able to eat fruit and vegetables in Shemitah. One is Yivul Nochri, which means it is non-Jewish produce. In other words, you can buy from Arabs or buy from non-Jews. You're allowed to have their produce. One is Heter Mechira. Heter means permission to sell. The rabbis, it's a bit similar to selling the chametz. If the land is sold to a non-Jew, then that produce from that land is actually, you're allowed to eat it during Shemitah. And the other one is Otsar Beit Din, which means like the treasury house of the Beit Din. If the Beit Din takes over the production of the vegetables, then therefore that is also allowed. So Yivul Nachli, the first one, non-Jewish produce. Now, some people say that is problematic because basically what it means is you're buying fruit and vegetables from Arabs, and some of them may be using the money to buy bombs to destroy you, whereas you can't buy fruit and vegetables from Jews serving the IDF who are protecting you, which is a bit of an anomaly. But anyway, we won't go on to that. The Otsar Beit Din is that's where the Beit Din pays the farmers the cost for production and transportation passes on those costs to consumers, but doesn't actually, you're not actually paying for the actual fruit itself. You're paying for the production process, and the Beth then takes it over. Most Haredi communities or Badatz communities in Israel rely on buying non-Jewish produce or using the Otzar Beitin. So if you go to, for example, Machane Yehuda in Jerusalem, and you'll see all the fruit stores, you'll see a little hechsher on each fruit store, and it'll tell you under which auspices that fruit and veg is allowed. And you'll see if it's Otzar Beitin or if it's non-Jewish produce. Most modern Orthodox people in Israel rely on Heter Mechira, where, as I say, where the land is actually sold to non-Jews. The Heter Mechira is quite a modern rule. It originated in 1888 when the first Shemitah was observed after the first Aliyah to Israel, to Palestine, and it was widely made available by Rav Kook in Shemitah years 1923 and 1930. So now it is the most common form of keeping Shemitah in Israel by having the land sold. There is a problem with that because it is forbidden by the Torah to actually sell land in Israel to non-Jews. So that is a problem, especially idol worshippers. So they get around that by selling it to Arabs, to Muslims who they don't believe are idol worshippers. And also they sell only the top level of the soil, not the land all the way down, just the top level of the soil where the plant is. And that way they get around the law. Anyway, Shemitah produce has a special kedusha. You can't dispose of it. You can't throw it in the dustbin. It has to rot. So therefore, if you live in Israel, you would have in your home a special pach shmita, a special recycling bin purely for shmita produce. You put your shmita produce, for example, just say you eat an apple and you'd eat half the apple and throw the other half away. You can't throw it in the bin. You put it in this special pach shmita, let it decompose, let it go rotten, and only then can you actually throw it away. It has a kedusha. It is holy. And also for that reason, Shemitah produce can't be exported from the country. There is a problem also, you can't waste Shemitah produce. Let's say you make wine from Shemitah grapes. Okay, you make wine, and can you use that wine for Havdalah if you pour your cup and it spills over, as one does for Havdalah? So you're wasting that bit of wine. Wasting Shemitah, that is problematic. Okay, can you use Shemitah oil to light your Shabbos candles? Yes, you can. Can you use Shemitah oil to light your Hanukkah candles? No, you can't, because you can't have benefit from Hanukkah candles. You can have benefit from Shabbos candles. We're not allowed to have benefit from Hanukkah candles. You can't use the light. Therefore, you can't use Shemitah oil to light your Hanukkah candles. What about on Seder, when you dip your finger in the wine, dam sevadeh, and you're spilling wine? Can you use Shemitah wine for that? Problematic. Anyway, what about, got a question for you now. What about if you live in Israel and you're invited to someone's house? Okay, can you go to someone's house if they observe different Shemitah rules to you? Does anyone have an idea of the answer to that one? Yeah, but so in other words, if they rely on Heter Mechira and you don't rely on Heter Mechira, can you eat in their house when the product may be forbidden to you? Well, my answer is ask your local Orthodox rabbi. I think really the rule is if they are using an acceptable Shemitah solution, if they're observing Shemitah somewhere or other, it should be fine. If they're not observing Shemitah, they shouldn't be eating in their house anyway. So they're obviously not kosher. So, yeah. Yeah, okay. This is kosher, but they're not observing Shemitah. Okay, so they're not haven't got the same standards as you. Okay. Yeah, it's not trade. That's quite right. It's not trade. Shemitah only applies, as I said, in Israel today. In Chutz La'aretz, we have restrictions on products imported from Israel, and we do have the strange phenomenon. If you go into a supermarket there, you'll find from Jews looking on the shelves in the supermarket. Oh, that's from Israel. Oh, can't touch it. A bit like the Arabs or the anti-Semites, shunning Israeli products. I think do it in a quiet way. Don't make a song and dance about we can't touch it because it's Israeli. Now, the other law about Shemitah, which I touched on earlier very briefly, is the law of releasing debts. So that at the end of the Shemitah year, if you've loaned money to another Jew at the end of the Shemitah year, that debt is annulled. So basically, if I lend you 100 quid and it comes in the Shemitah year, you don't have to pay me the money back if you haven't paid it yet. So therefore, be very careful in lending money to people in year 5 and year 6 of the cycle. There is a way around it. The rabbis have now come up, Hillel came up with a solution. There's a document called the Prosbul, where the loan is taken over by the Beis Din, and therefore that way you can get around and get your money back. And finally, I mentioned Jubilee very quickly. The Jubilee is the 50th year, the Jubilee year. It has all the same restrictions as Shemitah year about landlining, fallow, etc., but there are additional rules in Shemitah year, in Jubilee year. Number one, all slaves are freed. And secondly, all land returns to its original owners. So therefore, any land sold in Israel is sold leasehold for a maximum of 50 years. And the price you pay is the remaining term of the lease. Okay, so the 50th year, all land returns to its initial owners. And the other thing is in Shemitah, in the Yovel year, there's a ceremony on Yom Kippur in the Yovel year when the shofar is sounded on Yom Kippur, the same shofar notes that are used in Rosh Hashanah, and the Musaf has a similar similar wording to the Rosh Hashanah Musaf. Happens once every 50 years. We don't do it nowadays. There's no Yovel. There's no Sanhedrin to count, so we don't do it anymore. And that basically is a synopsis about Shemitah. So, anyone has any questions? Have some questions? Yeah. It belongs to a Jew now. It belongs to a Jew. Yeah, it belongs to a Jew now. Yeah. Oh, no, there's no Jubilee land anymore. No, there's only Jews. Only Jews. The idea is in your ancestral home. The idea that every tribe should be living in their own territories. Yeah. No, that's what we do today. That's what we did. We don't know. That's what we do today. Is that we divide by 7, but we don't know what they did then. There's dispute what they did in those days, whether it was 50 or 7. You end up with 2. Yes, 2 years in a row. Yeah, it was quite problematic. 2 years in a row. It was 2 years in a row. But people survived. There was enough produce in year number 6 to keep them going for those 3 years. So and any. Well, obviously, they'll start from zero. Start again. But there is a specific law to you shall count for yourselves 7 years, and then 7 lots of 7 years, then proclaim a jubilee. It's a matter of counting. Who counted? The Sanhedrin counted the years. This is year 1. This is year 2. They'll start counting again. Yeah. They'll sort it out. They'll have the answer. They'll have the answer. Okay. Thank you.